the lottery winner. Alvirah, come at once. I need you desperately. Alvirah's eyes snapped open. In a split second, she emerged from a comfortable dream in which she was a state dinner at the White House to the reality of being awakened at 3 a.m. by a pealing telephone, followed by the panicky voice of Baroness Min von Schreiber. Min, what's wrong? She cried. Willy grunted awake beside her. Honey, what's the matter? He mumbled. Alvirah had a soothing hand across his lips. Shh! Then she repeated, Min, what's wrong? Min's tragic groan rushed across the continent from the Cypress Point Spa in Pebble Beach, California, to the luxury apartment on Central Park South. We are going to be ruined. There was a jewel thief among the guests. Mrs. Hayward's diamonds have disappeared from the wall safe in her cottage. Saints preserve us, Alvirah said. What is Scott doing about it? Scott Alshorn, the sheriff of Monterey County, had befriended Alvirah when she helped solve a murder at the spa a few years earlier. Oh dear me, it's so complicated. We cannot call Scott, Min said, her voice uneven. Nadine Hayward is hysterical. She doesn't dare admit to her husband that the insurance lapsed on the diamonds. She persuaded him to give the handling of her personal insurance policies to her son by her first marriage so that he'd get the commission, and he gambled the premium check away. The insurance company would be responsible because her son was their agent, but then he would be prosecuted, and she can't bring herself to file a claim and have him sent to prison. So she has some wild idea of having paste copies made of the diamonds to fool her husband. By now, Alvirah was fully awake. Having paste copies worked in The Necklace by de Maupassant? I wonder if Mrs. Hayward has read it. De Maupassant, not de Maupassant, Min corrected. Then she sighed heavily. Alvirah, it is ridiculous to let anyone get away with stealing $4 million worth of jewelry. You can't just ignore this. Another theft could occur. You must rush here. I need you. You must take charge of identifying the culprit. As my guest, of course. And bring Willy. He could use the exercise classes. I shall assign him a personal trainer.
Wow.
Jesus Christ. "15 hours later, the limousine carrying Willy and Alvirah passed the Pebble Beach Club, then the estates lining Shore Drive. It rounded the bend, passing the tree that gave the Cypress Point Spa its name. Driving through the ornate iron gates of the spa, the car wound its way toward the main house, a rambling 3-story ivory stucco mansion with pale blue shutters. Even though she was exhausted, Alvirah's eyes were snapping with anticipation. I love this place, she told Willy. I hope Min gives us tranquility. It's my favorite cottage. I remember the first time I came here. It was right after we won the lottery, and the prospect of spending a week hobnobbing with all the celebrities made me think I'd died and gone to heaven. I know, honey, Willy said. It was the beginning of finding out how the other half lives. What a lesson. Why? Alvirah stopped suddenly, realizing she'd been about to remind Willy that when she'd helped to solve a murder at the spa, she'd almost gotten herself killed doing it. It was obvious Willy remembered. He put his hand over hers and said, Honey, I don't want you to get yourself in trouble worrying about somebody's lost jewelry. I won't. It'll be fun to help out, though. It's been too quiet lately. Oh, look, there's Min. The car had pulled up to the front door. Min came sweeping down the steps to greet them, her arms outstretched. She was wearing a blue linen dress that clung to her full but excellent figure. Her hair, not a shade different than it must have been 20 years ago, was twirled in an elaborate French twist. She was wearing pearl and gold earrings and a matching necklace. As always, she looked as though she had stepped out of a page in Vogue. "And to think she's 5 years older than me," Alvirah muttered in awe. Behind Min, a stately Baron Helmut von Schreiber descended his military carriage, making him seem taller than his 5'7". Jesus. Always gotta make fun of the damn height.
Hey, he's short height.
Like, my God. His perfectly trimmed goatee drifted a bit in the breeze, and his welcoming smile revealed perfect teeth. Only the crinkles around his blue-gray eyes hinted that he was in his early 50s. The chauffeur hopped out to open the door, but Min beat him to it. "You are true friends," she gushed, her arms open to embrace them. Suddenly she stopped and stared. "Alvirah, where did you buy that suit? It is well cut, but you must not wear beige. It washes you out." Then she stopped again, shaking her head this time. "Oh, but all of that will wait." The chauffeur was directed to take the luggage to Tranquility Cottage. "A maid will unpack for you," Min informed them. "We must talk." Obediently, they followed her up to her sumptuous office on the second floor of the mansion. Helmut closed the door and went over to the sideboard. "Iced tea, beer, something stronger?" he asked. Alvirah was always tickled by the fact that absolutely no liquor was allowed on the premises of Cypress Point Spa, except in Min and Helmut's private quarters. She opted for iced tea. Willy looked pathetically grateful at the thought of a beer. Really, she thought, it had been mean to roust him out of bed in the middle of the night, but it was the only way they could make the 9 o'clock flight. Even then, they hadn't been able to get in first class, and each of them was squeezed into a middle seat between other people. Willy's first words when they got off the plane were, "Honey, I didn't know how much I'd gotten used to the good life."
Jesus.
Fucking poor people. Sipping the iced tea, Alvirah got right to the point. "Min, exactly what happened? When was the robbery discovered?" "Late yesterday afternoon. Nadine Hayward arrived on Saturday, so she'd been here 3 days. Her husband is staying at their condo in the Pebble Beach Club. He's in a golf tournament there. They're going on to San Francisco for a charity ball, so Nadine brought all her best jewelry and put it in the wall safe in her cottage." "She's been here before?" Alvirah asked. "Regularly. Ever since she married Cotter Hayward. She comes to the spa whenever he's in one of his tournaments. He's a fine amateur golfer." Alvirah frowned. "That's what's been throwing me. There was another woman named Hayward one of the times I was here, a couple of years ago. She was Mrs. Cotter Hayward, too." "That was the first wife, Elise. She still visits the spa, but usually not at the same time as Nadine. Even though she loathes Cotter, she was not happy about being replaced, especially since she unfortunately introduced the new wife to him." "They fell in love under the same roof," Helmut said with a sigh. "These things happen, but to complicate matters, Elise is also a guest this week." "Wait a minute," Alvirah said. "You mean to tell me that Elise and Nadine are both here?" "That's exactly it. Naturally, we have placed them at tables distant from each other in the dining room and arranged their schedules so they should never be in the same exercise classes." "Alvirah, honey, I think you're getting off the subject," Willy suggested. "Why don't you stick to finding out about the robbery, and then maybe we can go over to the cottage and catch a nap?" "Oh, Willy, I'm sorry." Alvirah shook her head. "I'm so inconsiderate. Willy needs more sleep than I do, and he couldn't close an eye on the plane. His seat was between two kids who were playing checkers on his tray table. The parents wouldn't let them sit together because they fight so much." "Why didn't the parents sit with them?" Min asked. "They had their hands full with 3-year-old twins, and you know how good-hearted Willy is." "The robbery?" Willy prompted. "This is what happened," Min said. "At 5 o'clock, Nadine had gone to the salon to have her hair recombed. She got back to Repose Cottage at 10 minutes of 6 to find it torn apart. All the drawers had been rifled, her suitcases pulled out. Someone, or perhaps several people, had thoroughly searched every inch of the cottage." "What were they looking for?" "The jewelry, of course. You know how everyone gets dressed up for the evening. The women love to show off their gems to each other. Nadine had wore a diamond necklace and bracelet the night before. Someone was looking for those pieces, but couldn't know that she also had the Hayward tiara, rings, and 2 other bracelets with her as well." Min sighed, then burst out. "Why did the stupid woman have to bring everything she owned? Surely she couldn't wear all of that to the charity ball." Helmut patted her hand. Minna, I cannot allow you to let your blood pressure rise. Think beautiful thoughts." He took up the story. "What is odd is that the intruder apparently stumbled onto the safe only after searching through everything else. It is hidden behind the picture of Minna and myself in the sitting room of the cottage." "Wait a minute," Alvirah interrupted. "You just said that you thought someone must have seen Nadine wearing the jewelry the night before. Did she leave the spa that evening?" "No. She was at what we jokingly call the cocktail hour, then at dinner, then at the Mozart recital in the music room." "Then the only people who would have seen her are the other guests and the other staff, and every one of them would know enough to look for the safe. All the cottages have one now." Alvirah sucked in her breath and smoothed the skirt of the beige suit she had been sure would find approval in Min's eyes. "I did forget that she said beige washes me out," she thought ruefully. "Oh well." She reminded her train of thought. "That's something else. Was the safe jimmied?" "No. Someone knew the combination Nadine had set." "Or was a professional and knew how to find it," Willy added. "What makes you think the thief isn't 1,000 miles away right now?" Min sighed. "Our only hope is that if it was an inside job, and Alvirah can track down the perpetrator, we may be able to force him or her to return the gems. All the guests are known to us. Their reputations are impeccable. There are only 3 new staff members, and their movements are absolutely accounted for." Min looked suddenly 10 years older. "Alvirah, this is the sort of problem that can ruin us. Cotter Hayward is a very difficult man. He will not only prosecute Nadine's son, but I also wouldn't put it past him to find some reason to hold us responsible for the theft." "When is Nadine supposed to leave for San Francisco and the charity ball?" Alvirah asked. "On Saturday. That gives you 3 days to perform a miracle." A 2-hour nap and a luxurious shower revived Alvirah. Anxious for Min's approval, she settled at the dressing table and applied her makeup carefully. Not too much blush, she thought. Don't go over the lip line. Just a touch of eyeliner. Use dark powder to soften the contour of jaw and nose. She was glad to hear Willy singing in the shower. He was feeling better as well. On the bed, she had laid out a handsome caftan that Min had selected for her during her last visit to the spa. After she slipped into it, she fastened on her sunburst pin and got out her notebook. While Willy dressed, she jotted down the information Min had given her, breaking it into categories. When she was finished, she had several immediate questions. Why was Elise Hayward, the first Mrs. Cotter Hayward, here? Coincidence? Helmut had indicated that Elise usually avoided being at the spa at the same time as her former friend, Nadine. Interesting, Alvirah thought. The 3 new staff members worked in the Roman bath, which was the newest attraction at the spa. It had taken 2 years to complete, but was truly splendid, a replica of the one in Baden-Baden. 2 of the newcomers were masseuses. The third was an attendant in the resting room, but Min had said that their movements were accounted for. Even so, Alvirah decided, I'll go to the Roman bath and at least take a look at the 3 of them.
Okay.
Willy appeared at the door of the sitting room. Do I pass inspection to mingle with the swells? His fine head of wavy white hair framed his genial features and warm blue eyes. A handsome navy sports jacket hid the paunch that reappeared whenever they dined lavishly on a cruise. You look splendid, Alvirah beamed. So do you. Hurry up, honey. I can't wait to have one of Min's fake cocktails. The veranda was already filled with guests. Violin music from inside the mansion drifted through the open windows. As they walked up the path, Alvirah said, Now remember, Min is going to introduce us to Nadine Hayward. Nadine knows we're here to help, and that later on we're going to stop back at her cottage and get a real chance to talk to her. Since they'd won the lottery, Alvirah had been coming to the spa at least once a year. Willy would sometimes pick her up at the end of the week, and they'd go on to take a trip, but this would be his first overnight stay. Honey, what have I got to say to those people? He'd ask when she'd urge him to accompany her. These guys talk about their golf game or bat the breeze about the cut-ups they were in, their Ivy League schools, or how their companies are investing in Asia. Do I tell them that I was born in Brooklyn, went to PS 38, and was a working plumber until we struck it rich in the lottery? Do you think they care that my hobby now is to trot around the world with you and, when we're in New York, to fix pipes and sinks and toilets for people who need help? There isn't one of them who wouldn't die happy knowing he has $2 million a year, less taxes coming in, was Alvirah's answer. Still, she admitted to herself that she was a little concerned that somebody might try to put Willy down with one of those sweetly chilling remarks that could cut like a knife. Anyone tried that on her, and she could give as good as she got, but Willy was too kind to zing anyone.
Oh, Willy.
5 minutes later, she realized she didn't have, or didn't, 5 minutes later, she realized she needn't have worried. Willy was deep in conversation with the CEO of American Plumbing, explaining to him exactly why his biggest competitor's highly touted new line of hydro flush toilets were totally impractical for the average home. Jesus.
Oh, do they freeze?
The biggest question. As Alvirah watched, the CEO's expression became more and more delighted. Tanned, tinted, and handsomely dressed men and women were clustered in little groups. Alvirah chuckled over a remark she overheard one woman make to another. Darling, you don't know me well enough yet to dislike me. Then Min plucked up her sleeve. Alvirah, I want you to meet Nadine Hayward. Alvirah turned swiftly. She didn't know what she'd expected, but it wasn't this very pretty, sweet-faced, blue-eyed blonde with peaches and cream complexion. She could pass for 30, and probably is in her early 40s. Alvirah decided, but boy, she must be nervous. She looks as though she got dressed during a fire drill. Nadine Hayward was wearing a lime green shantung outfit with wide trousers and a waist-length jacket. It had obviously cost a fortune, but it looked all wrong. The middle button of the jacket wasn't fastened. Black pumps were a discordant note against the silvery sheen of the outfit. Nadine's dark blonde hair was carelessly twisted into a chignon. A single strand of pearls was slipping against the neckline of the pale green shell. As Alvirah watched, Nadine's expression changed to sheer panic. "Oh my God, my husband is coming," she murmured. "I thought you said he was attending a golf dinner at the club," Min hissed. "He was supposed to, but—" Nadine's voice trailed off, and she clutched Min's arm. Alvirah glanced at the path. A tall man was winding his way up towards the veranda. "When he heard Elise was here, he told me I wouldn't see him till Saturday," Nadine whispered through new bloodless lips. Around them, people were chatting and laughing, but Alvirah caught several sets of eyes appraising them. The tension emanating from Nadine Hayward was palpable. "Smile," she ordered firmly. "Button your jacket. Fix your pearls. That's better." "But he doesn't know the jewelry's missing. He'll wonder why I'm not wearing any of it," Nadine moaned. Cotter Hayward was at the stairs. "Sotto voce," Alvirah urged. "For your son's sake, you've got to fake this until I get a chance to help you out." At the mention of her son, an expression of pain came into Nadine's eyes, and then was gone. "I did a bit of acting way back," she said. Now her smile seemed genuine, and a moment later, when her husband came up the steps and touched her arm, her reaction of astonished pleasure was flawless. "I don't like this guy," Alvirah thought as Hayward curtly acknowledged the introduction to her, then turned to his wife. "I imagine they'll let me stay for dinner here," he said. "I have to get back in time for the speeches, but I wanted to see you." "You are most welcome," Min said. "Would you and Nadine prefer to have a small table to yourselves, or do you want to join her at the group table?" "No groups, please," Hayward said dismissively. "He dyes his hair," Alvirah thought. "Good job. But I can tell. Nobody in his 50s is that blonde. But Cotter Hayward was a handsome man, no getting around that." It was Min and Helmut's firm rule that their guests share tables of 8. The only exception was if a guest had a visitor and needed a chance to talk privately. In that case, never more than once a week, a table for 2 was available. Tonight, Alvirah was delighted to see that Min had placed her and Willy at the group table with Elise and first Mrs. Cotter Hayward, who turned out to be a brittle, pencil-thin, auburn-haired fashion plate in her mid-40s. A handsome older couple from Chicago named Jennings, a stunning woman in her late 30s, Bara Snow, a model whom Alvirah instantly recognized from the Adrian Cosmetics ad, Michael Fields, an ex-congressman from New York, and Herbert Green, the plumbing CEO, were the other diners at table 8. Alvirah managed to maneuver it so that she was only 1 seat away from Elise Cotter. It quickly became obvious to her that Elise was extremely vocal about both her former husband and her former friend. "Nadine doesn't look like Sparkle Planty tonight," she observed caustically. "I wonder if that's a matter of choice, or if Cotter has started using his favorite line about keeping the jewelry in a bank vault because he worries about a robbery. If so, I mean he's met someone else, and Nadine's days are numbered." Her smile was not pleasant. "I should know." "Nadine was wearing some of Hayward jewelry the other night," Bara Snow added. "You had dinner served in your cottage, Elise." Alvirah perked up her ears and switched on the recording device in her sunburst pin. Had it been just an accident that Cotter Hayward's first wife mentioned a robbery? She'd have to call Charlie Evans, her editor at the Globe, and ask him to send her some background on all the Haywards from the newspaper morgue. "Let's see," she thought as she selected a tiny loin lamb chop from the silver platter the waitress was holding. "When I was here 4 years ago, Elise was still married to Cotter, So Nadine hasn't been in the picture too long. It's obvious Elise was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, but I can tell from her voice that Nadine isn't a graduate of Miss Porter's. Wonder how she got so close to the Haywards in the first place. Honey, you're still holding the serving fork, Willie prodded. At a table near the picture window overlooking the pool and gardens, Nadine and Cotter Hayward ate in almost total silence. When Cotter spoke, it was usually to complain. Then came the question Nadine dreaded. How come you're not wearing any decent jewelry? Every other woman in this place is showing off her trophies. Surely yours must be some of the finest. Nadine managed to keep her voice even. I don't think it was the best time, or it was in the best taste to dangle them in front of Elise. After all, she was wearing them when she came here a few years ago. Her fingers damp with perspiration, she watched her husband's reaction and inwardly collapsed with relief when he nodded. I suppose you're right. Now, I've got to get back. Those after-dinner speeches will be starting. As he got up, he leaned over quickly and brushed her cheek with an impatient kiss. The way he would have kissed Elise toward the end of their marriage, Nadine thought. Oh, dear God, what am I going to do? She watched him walk across the spacious room and then was astonished to see Elise hurrying toward him. Even though Nadine could only see the back of his head, Cotter's body language was obvious. He stopped abruptly, went rigid, and then after Elise spoke to him, pushed her aside and hurried out. Nadine was sure that Elise had reminded him that the final divorce payment was owed to her next week. $3 million. Cotter was infuriated at the prospect of paying it. And I'm paying for it as well, Nadine thought. After what Elise cost him, the prenuptial I signed will leave me penniless if he gets angry enough about the jewelry to divorce me. Now what did Elise have to say to her ex? Alvirah wondered. As she nibbled on a tiny cookie and tried to make the rainbow sherbet last, from where she was sitting she could see the expression of savage satisfaction on the divorcee's face and the angry dark red flush that colored Cotter Hayward's features. My, Bara Snow murmured with a slight smile. I didn't know fireworks were on the menu. Do you know the Haywards well? Alvirah asked casually. We have mutual friends and occasionally are in the same place. Willie jumped up to hold Elise Hayward's chair as she returned to the table, a grim smile on her face. Well, I made his day, she said with obvious delight. There's nothing that drives Cotter crazier than parting with money, she laughed. His lawyers have been trying to negotiate a settlement instead of a final $3 million payment next week. They'd like me to accept annual installments for the next 20 years. The answer I gave them is that I didn't win a lottery. I divorced a rich man. That's for our benefit, Alvirah thought. It depends on the annual installments, she murmured. Herbert Green, the plumbing executive, chuckled. I like your wife, he told Willie. So do I. Willie had just finished his sherbet. That was a great dinner, but I have to say I'd like to top it off with a Big Mac. Bara laughed. I'm glad you feel like that. My sister was awarded a McDonald's franchise in her divorce. I wasn't that lucky. Neither will Nadine be when Cotter tires of her, Elise volunteered. Here's her settlement. She touched her thumb to the tip of her forefinger to form a perfect circle. Her meaning was very clear. Nadine's a perfect example of why we should obey the 9th commandment. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, Willie said. Or husband, Elise laughed. Nadine's problem is that she was unlucky enough to get mine. Nadine Hayward did not wait for the recital in the music room. Instead, she slipped away from the dining room with the first people to leave and made her way to her cottage, which was one of the farthest from the main house. It's Wednesday night, she thought. Saturday morning, Cotter will come for me. I'll have to tell him about the robbery. He'll want to know why I didn't call the police immediately. Then I'll have to tell him that Bobby didn't pay the insurance premium to the company, and Bobby will be prosecuted. I can't let that happen. If only I hadn't come here 4 years ago and met Cotter. It was the thought she had been trying to avoid. As she turned off the main path to her cottage, Nadine was filled with self-loathing and regret that she had ever met Cotter. My one extravagance, she thought, coming here after Robert died, and I had to meet him. Her first husband had been Robert Crandall, a distant cousin of Elise's, handsome and bright and witty and loving, and a gambler. She'd married him at 20, divorced him when Bobby was 10. It was the only way to separate herself from his debts, but they'd remain friends. More than friends. I always loved him, she thought now. He'd been killed nearly 5 years ago, driving too fast on a rain-slick highway. Still a gambler, still untrustworthy. But he'd left an insurance policy that was enough to take care of Bobby's college education. And it was the relief of discovering this fact, coupled with the emotional drain of his death, that impelled Nadine to treat herself to a week at Cypress Point Spa.
Drink.
When she was still married to Robert, she'd occasionally met Cotter and Elise at family events. By the time she met them again, at the spa, it was clear that they were barely speaking to each other. 3 months later, Cotter phoned. I'm in the process of a divorce, he'd announced, because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Thoughtful, charming. Oh, how Cotter could turn on the charm. You've never had it easy, Nadine, he said. It's time someone took care of you. I know what you went through with Robert. It's a miracle he wasn't murdered. Those bookies play rough when you welsh on debts. I bailed him out from time to time. I don't think you knew that. He had never bailed Robert out, Nadine thought as she put the key in the door of her cottage. Cotter never bailed anyone out. Before she could turn the key, the door opened and the frightened face of her 22-year-old son stared down at her. Then Bobby threw his arms around her. Mom, help me! What am I going to do? Alvirah and Willy lingered over decaf espresso with the other guests at their table, hoping to pick up more gossip. But to Alvirah's disappointment, Elise dropped the subject of her ex-husband. Are you attending the recital, Mrs. Meehan? Barr Snow asked. We're still on New York time, Alvirah said, after Elise's crack about the lottery. It was on the tip of her tongue to say that they were going to hit the sack, but she decided against it. I think we'd better retire, she finished. At a demure pace, Alvirah led Willy through the dining room. As soon as they were outside, however, she quickened her step. Let's go, she said. I'm dying to talk to Nadine. From what I'm learning about Cotter Hayward's attitude toward money, there's no doubt that he won't be talked out of reporting the theft to the insurance company. When they arrived at Nadine's cottage, they were surprised to hear the murmur of voices through the open window. I wonder if the husband came back, Alvirah whispered, but at her knock the door was opened by a handsome young man who, even in the half-light, she could see was the image of Nadine. Sitting opposite them on the pale blue and white sofas in the harmoniously decorated sitting room, Willy and Alvirah waited as Nadine told Bobby that the Meehans knew all about the theft and were there to help. It was clear to Alvirah that Bobby was desperately worried, but even so, she did not like it when he tried to justify his own chicanery. Mom, I swear to you this is the first time I ever crashed a premium check, he said, his voice shrill. I'd made a bet. It was a sure thing. A sure thing. Nadine's voice broke into a near sob. Your father's words. I heard them for the first time when I was 19 years old. I don't want to hear them anymore. Mom, I was going to reinstate the policy. I swear. "Wasn't there a notice of termination sent?" Alvirah asked. Bobby looked away. "I knew it was coming." "And destroyed it?" Alvirah persisted. "Yes." "That's also a criminal offense," she said severely. "Bobby!" Nadine cried. "I persuaded Cotter to switch the jewelry insurance to you because you'd have gotten the job with Haskell. Then I persuaded him to let you live in the New York apartment." So like his father, she thought. The repentant face, the dejected slump of the shoulders. It was though Bobby knew what she was thinking. "Mom, I'm not like Dad. Not that way. Any time I bet before, it was with my money." "Not always. I've covered some of your losses. But never a lot. Mom, if you can talk Cotter into not persecuting, I swear, never again. I don't want to go to prison." Bobby buried his face in his hands. Nadine put her arms around him. "Bobby," she said, "don't you see? I'm helpless to stop him." Then she paused. "Or am I?" An hour later, when Willy and Alvirah were settled in bed, Alvirah began to think aloud. Nadine's son Bobby is what I would call spineless, and more than a little selfish. I mean, when you think about it, his mother persuaded Cotter Hayward to switch the insurance policy on the jewelry to him so he'd get the commission. Then he gambles away the premium. And my feeling is that he's more worried about the prospect of going to prison than he is about the fact that the fallout of all this might mean the end of Nadine's marriage. "Uh-huh," Willy agreed, his tone sleepy. "Not that I think Cotter Hayward is any prize," Alvirah continued. "He reminds me of Mr. Parker. You remember I cleaned for the Parkers on Wednesdays until they moved to Florida? I think she died. The nice ones always die, don't they? And the mean old birds hang around forever. Anyhow, picky. That's the way he was. And cheap. One day Mr. Parker yelled at his poor wife for giving away an old suit of his. He had a closet full of clothes, but couldn't stand to let so much as an odd sock get away." Willy's even breathing was his only comment. "The only way to save Bobby Crandall from prison is to find the thief." Alvirah mused aloud. "The thing is that the night of the robbery, Nadine locked the front door of the cottage. But since Bobby said he was able to get in through the sliding glass door of the sunroom tonight, it stands to reason that anyone else could have done the same thing. Nobody really worries about locks around here." And then a thought shot through her mind that made her gasp. How heavy a gambler was Bobby Crandall? He knew his mother had the jewelry with her. Nadine had told them that the combination she always set when she used a wall safe in a spa or hotel was the year of her birth, 1953. Bobby probably knew that. Alvirah pondered the notion that Bobby Crandall might have been in deep trouble because of gambling debts. Suppose his life had been threatened if he didn't produce the money he owed. Suppose he owed very big money. Suppose he decided to steal the jewelry even though he had already stolen the premium money. Maybe he was desperate enough to hope that his mother could persuade Cotter Hayward not to file a claim for the missing jewelry, she thought. Alvirah had another question to ask herself before she fell asleep. Why did Cotter Hayward suddenly decide to have dinner with Nadine tonight? The call came at 11 o'clock. Shortly after he had retired, still wide awake, Cotter Hayward reached for the receiver and barked a greeting. Hayward got out of bed and dressed in chinos and a sweater. Then, as an afterthought, he made a martini. "I probably shouldn't have one," he told himself sourly. But given the way his night had gone, he could certainly use it. At 11:15, he left his condo on the grounds of the Pebble Beach Club and, walking in the shadows, made his way to the 16th hole. Standing in the wooded area off the green, he waited. The faint snap of a twig alerted him to an approaching presence. He turned around expectantly. Just then the clouds parted. In the instant before he died, Cotter Hayward lived a lifetime. He saw his assailant, realized that it was a golf club that was about to descend on his skull, and even had time to recognize how much of a fool he had been. At 5:45 a.m., Alvirah was dreaming that they were sailing from Southampton on the QE2. Then she realized that the sound she was hearing was not a ship's bell, but the peal of a telephone. It was Min. "Alvirah, please come up to the main house immediately. There is a problem." Alvirah struggled into a pale yellow Dior sweatsuit and matching sneakers. As Willy blinked sleep from his eyes, "What's the matter now?" he asked. "I don't know yet. Oh darn if I didn't put this top on backwards." Willy squinted in the direction of the clock. "I thought people came to this place to relax." "Some people do. Hurry up and get dressed so you can go with me. I've got a bad feeling." A few minutes later, Alvirah's bad feeling was compounded by the presence at the spa's main entrance of a car bearing the logo of the sheriff of Monterey County. "Scott's here," she said tersely. Scott Alshorn was in Min's office. Min and Helmet were still in dressing gowns, even though they both seemed distraught. Alvirah could not resist a moment of total admiration for the way the two of them could look like fashion plates, even when roused from bed in the pre-dawn hours. Min's robe was a shimmering pink satin with a lace-edged collar and delicately corded sash. Helmet's maroon knee-length silk robe was trimly handsome over matching pajamas. Fortunately, Sheriff Alshorn never changed. His teddy bear body, his craggy and tanned face, his white, unmanageable hair and piercing eyes were still the same. He was as worn when he embraced a friend as he was implacable when he was trailing a criminal. He hugged Alvirah and shook hands with Willy. Then, dispensing with small talk, he said, "Cotter Hayward's body was found on the grounds of the Pebble Beach Club an hour ago by a maintenance man." "Saints preserve us!" Alvirah gasped, even as she thought, which one did it, Nadine or Bobby? "Vicious blows with a heavy object. Whoever killed him wanted to make sure he was dead." Scott looked at Alvirah appraisingly. "From what Min tells me, you're not here just to be pampered." "Not exactly." Alvirah's mind was racing. "Does Nadine know about her husband?" "Scott came directly here," Min said. We will accompany him when he tells her. Helmet's medical services may be required. I only wish I knew where to reach Nadine's son so he can rush to her side." "Bobby's..." Willy was interrupted by a warning glance from Alvirah. The exchange was not lost on Scott Alshorn. "Do you know this Bobby?" he asked. "We've met," Alvirah hedged, then realized it would be useless to conceal from Scott the fact that Bobby Crandall had been in Nadine's cottage at 10 o'clock last night. "Is he staying with his mother?" Scott queried. "He was going to last night," Alvirah admitted. "Nadine is in one of the 2-bedroom cottages." Scott stood up, suddenly looming over the others. "Alvirah, my good friend," he said, "let's get something straight. There was a major theft on these premises 3 days ago. I should have been notified immediately. Min has given me the background, but that doesn't justify her decision to go along with Nadine Hayward and conceal the crime. What you people don't seem to understand is that we should have been collecting samples for DNA testing at the safe. Now it's too late." He moved closer to Alvirah. "Instead of sending for me, she sent for you. Now we have not only a grand larceny theft, but a first-degree murder on our hands. I want any information you've picked up since you arrived here yesterday. Do I make myself clear?" I want to make myself clear, too, Willy said, and his tone was icy. Don't bully my wife. Oh, honey, Scott's not bullying me, Alvirah said soothingly. It's just his version of the Miranda warning. She looked up at Scott. I know what you're thinking, that Nadine and Bobby are the likely suspects, but I also know you're a big man and will keep an open mind. I met Carter Hayward a few years ago when he was here with his then-wife, Elise. They weren't exactly lovey-dovey at the time, and believe me, from what I saw last night, that lady hated him. But she had nothing to gain by killing him, or at least not as far as I know. Then again, I bet Carter Hayward had a lot of enemies, so before you jump to conclusions, take a good look at some of the men in that golf tournament and find out which of them might have had a reason to hate him too. Min pointed to the clock. It is going on to 6:30, she said nervously. The morning walk will be starting in 15 minutes. We must let Nadine know what has happened. And I think Elise should find out too, before the rumors start flying, Alvirah suggested. If you'd like, I'll go to her cottage and talk to her. Not without me, Scott snapped, and then added with a reluctant grin. All right, Alvirah, you can come along when we see Hayward's widow. Min and Helmut rushed upstairs to change into jogging suits, and then the somber procession left the main house. Willy elected to go to their own cottage. I'll only be in the way, he said. Maids carrying breakfast trays passed them as they walked down the winding path to Nadine's cottage. Alvirah could feel their curious stares. As it turned out, Helmut's medical services were indeed needed. Nadine was in the sitting room when they arrived. She looked as though she had not closed her eyes all night. Alvirah noticed immediately that her robe was inside out. Must have put it on in a real hurry, she thought. Why? Nadine's peaches and cream complexion went ashen when she saw them. What's wrong? Has anything happened to Bobby? So that's it, Alvirah thought. Bobby's taken off and she doesn't know where he's gone. She watched as Min and Helmut stood protectively by Nadine as Scott told her that her husband had been the victim of foul play. Nadine said nothing. Then she sighed and slumped over in a dead faint. If Nadine was a wreck, you should have seen Bobby, Alvirah told Willy an hour later. He came in while Helmut was trying to revive his mother, and I guess he thought she was dead. He'd been crying, you could see that. He pushed Helmut aside and kept saying, Mom, it's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did he mean sorry about stealing the premium, or they had an argument? Willy asked. That's what I'm trying to figure out. When Nadine came to and Helmut gave her a sedative and put her to bed, Scott talked to Bobby, but all he said was that he couldn't sleep and got up to go for a jog. Then he said he didn't have another word to say until he hired a lawyer. Willy whistled soundlessly. That doesn't sound like an innocent man talking. Alvirah nodded reluctantly. You can tell he's not really a bad kid, Willy, and he certainly loves his mother. But I do think he's the kind who doesn't think things through. I mean, I hate to say it, but I could see him deciding that if Carter Hayward were out of the way, his mother would never have to report the missing jewelry. Willy handed her a cup of coffee. You haven't had anything to eat. The maid left a thermos and what passes for a muffin. You need a magnifying glass to see it on the plate. 900 calories a day, honey. That's why people look so good when they leave here. Alvirah devoured the muffin in one bite. But you know what was interesting? When we went to tell Elise about her ex-husband, she wasn't hysterical. I thought she couldn't stand him. So did I. She went hysterical. She went hysterical! I thought she couldn't stand him. So did I. And maybe she couldn't. But she knew that Cotter Hayward was so afraid of dying that he would never make a will. He has no children, so that means that Nadine may be a very wealthy widow, when Willie finished. And I guess now her son can afford to hire a good lawyer. At 12 o'clock, Scott returned to the spa with a search warrant for Nadine's cottage. By then, the media were camped out beside the compound. I can fucking read, I swear to God. By then, the media were camped outside the compound, and police barricades had been erected to hold them back. Sheriff Alshorn was besieged for a statement. He got out of his car and stood before the cameras and microphones. "The investigation is proceeding," he said. "The autopsy is presently taking place. You will be kept informed of developments." Questions were shouted at him. "Sheriff, is it true that Mrs. Hayward's son has retained a lawyer? Is it true that Mrs. Hayward's jewelry was stolen a few days ago and you were not informed? Is it true that Mr. Hayward had a confrontation with his ex-wife last night at dinner?" "No comment," Scott said tersely in response to each question hurried at him. He got back in his car and snapped, "Step on it," to his deputy. They were waved past the barricade and escaped onto the spa grounds. "I wonder how many of the employees will sell their inside stories to the scandal sheets." He fumed as they headed to the widow's cottage. Nadine was dressed and, although deathly pale, she was completely composed. "I understand," she said tonelessly when Scott showed her the search warrant. "I don't know what you're looking for, and I'm very sure you won't find anything incriminating, but go ahead." "Where is your son?" Scott asked. "I've sent him over to the Roman bath. The massage and swim treatment will be good for him." "He does understand that he is not to leave the premises." "I gather you made that quite clear. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll be in Baroness von Schreiber's office. She is helping me make my arrangements for my husband's cremation when his body is released." The search of the cottage was thorough, and the results were nil. Exasperated, Scott studied the wall safe. "This is a pretty good one," he commented to a deputy. "It wasn't jimmied, so that means if it wasn't a professional safecracker, whoever took those gems had the combination." "The son?" "He was in his New York office Wednesday morning. Jewelry disappeared Tuesday afternoon. We're checking the red-eye flights, but of course he may not have used his own name if he was on one of them." It was in the second bedroom, the one in which Bobby had slept, that Scott found something that he felt was significant. Nadine's pocket-sized phone directory, wedged open by the base of the telephone to the H page. The first 5 telephone numbers were listings for Cotter Hayward, his office, his boat, the New York apartment, and the New Mexico ranch, the Pebble Beach condo. "Bobby was in here last night," Scott said. "Cotter was at the Pebble Beach condo. I wonder if our friend Bobby placed a call to him and arranged a private meeting." It was the custom of the Cypress Point Spa that luncheon was served informally at tables around the pool. Most of the guests were dressed in tank suits and robes. The ones who had completed the morning program and were planning on an afternoon of golf on the spa's newly installed 9-hole course were suitably garbed for a few hours on the links. Alvirah had no intention of following either a beauty or exercise regime, and she'd never hold a golf club. Nonetheless, she changed hastily into the dark blue tank suit and pink terry cloth robe that were part of the standard equipment of every cottage. She had prevailed on Willy to likewise clad himself in the bathing trunks and short robe that were standard for male guests. "We don't want to stand out," she'd urged him. "I need to get a feel of what people are saying about the murder." She realized it probably would look tacky to wear her sunburst pin on the robe, even though the woman who looked like Christmas trees at the evening cocktail party wouldn't do that. Nevertheless, she fastened the pin to her lapel.
Oh my god. Okay. You didn't decide against this.
She turned the recording device on as they approached the pool. She didn't want to miss a word of what people would be saying about the murder. Alvirah was surprised to see Elise sitting at one of the tables with Bara Snow and other guests. "Come on, honey," she hissed to Willy, noting that there were still 2 seats available at the table. Now appearing totally composed, Elise had eschewed the spa-issue tank suit and robe and was wearing a striped cotton shirt, white skirt, and golf shoes. "A terrible shock," she was saying to the woman who had just approached the table to speak to her. "After all, I was married to Cotter for 15 years, and at least some of those times were happy. Thanks to him, I took up golf, and for that I'll always be grateful. He was an excellent teacher. That's what really kept us together so long. I think that long after we were sick of each other, we still enjoyed playing golf together." "Are you sure you want to play this afternoon? We can get someone to fill in the foursome." The woman who was talking to Elise was another one of the slim, tanned, elegant types with an almost English accent. She only looks familiar because she's a clone of half the women here, Alvirah decided after studying her for a few moments. Bara Snow answered for Elise. "I'm certain Elise will be better off if she plays with us. I've already asked a caddy to get her clubs from her car. She mustn't just sit and brood." "I'm not brooding," Elise contradicted sharply. "Really, Bara, if you insist on offering a sympathy, save it for Nadine. I hear that Bobby was with her last night, and I gather she wasn't expecting him. I'd love to know what kind of scrape he's in now. Nadine had to beg money from Cotter to bail him out the last time. He's going to be just like his father, that boy." Alvirah remembered that Elise was a distant cousin of Bobby's late father. How did she know that Nadine bailed Bobby out? She wondered. Did she hear that from Cotter? She thought about Elise's hysterical reaction to the news of the death. Was it just because Nadine will inherit a lot of money? Or was there a love-hate relationship with her ex-husband? Interesting, she decided. The Jennings woman, who had been at their table the night before, hurried over. "I just heard on the television that the rumor is that Nadine's jewelry was stolen the other day. Isn't that incredible?" "The jewelry," Elise gasped. "The Hayward jewelry? My God, did Cotter know that? That stuff was in his family for 3 generations. They never gave it to the wife, you know. She was just allowed to wear it. His father was married 4 times, and the joke was that all 4 wives had their portraits done in the same pieces. They were known as the Hayward chorus line. I thought Nadine would finally be the one to keep everything. Cotter was the last of the line." "She's thrilled it's been stolen," Alvirah thought, "or else she's a good actress." A genial-looking man in the uniform of a spa caddy approached the table, a golf bag over his shoulder. "I have your clubs, Mrs. Hayward," he said as he put the bag down, "but I think I'd better clean the sand wedge off. The sleeve is missing, and it's a bit sticky." "That's ridiculous," Elise snapped. "All the clubs were cleaned before they were put back in the bag." "Sticky?" Alvira's antennae began to vibrate. She jumped up and said, "I'll take a look at that, please." She took the golf bag from the startled caddy and looked down into it. Being careful not to touch any of the clubs, she leaned over and studied the one that did not have a sleeve covering it. The curved steel head of the club was matted with dark brown stains. Even with her naked eye, it was possible to see bits of skin and hair sticking to the metal. "Somebody call Sheriff Alshorn," Alvirah said quietly. That's fine. "Tell him I think I found the murder weapon."
Kind of wipe it off, buddy.
Like, come on.
Let's put it back in the bag.
Let's put it right back in the bag. 2 hours later, Alvirah and Willy were visited in their cottage by Sheriff Scott Alshorn. "That was good work, Alvirah," Scott admitted somewhat grudgingly. "If that caddy had cleaned the club, valuable evidence would have been lost." "DNA?" Alvirah asked. Alshorn shrugged. "Maybe. We do know that it was the murder weapon, and we know it came from the ex-wife's golf bag, which was in the trunk of her unlocked car in the parking area." "Meaning anyone could have taken it and replaced it," Willy commented. "Anyone who knew it was there," Alvirah said. "Right, Scott?" "Yes." "I didn't touch that club, but it looked like it must have made a pretty nasty weapon. Am I right?" Alvirah's forehead was furrowed, always a sign that, as she put it, she had her thinking cap on. "Yes, it made a formidable weapon," Scott agreed. "The sand wedge is the heaviest golf club." "I didn't know that. If I were going to bop someone on the skull with a golf club, I'd have grabbed just any of them, I think." "Alvirah," Scott said, shaking his head. "Maybe I'll just have to hire you. Yes, I've come to the same conclusion. Someone who's either a golfer or knows about golf chose that club for his or her encounter with Cotter Hayward last night. And you're concentrating on Bobby Crandall, aren't you?" He shrugged. "Or his mother, for all the reasons you know." Alvirah thought about Bobby, the scared, handsome young face, the attempt to justify himself by pointing out that he'd always covered his own losses until now. She figured it was closer to the truth that Nadine had always bailed him out, and he had come running to her expecting her to be able to do it again. Last night, Alvirah had seen with her own eyes that he realized this time his mother was powerless to save him. And it was pretty obvious that Nadine would do anything rather than see her son go to prison. She'd as much as said that. "It looks bad for both of them," she said slowly. "But you know something, Scott? They're both innocent. I feel it in my bones." They were in the sitting room of the cottage. The sliding glass door was open, and a refreshing, cool breeze from the Pacific had cleared the midday heat. Running footsteps sounded from the patio outside. Then suddenly, Nadine was pushing open the sliding screen. "Alvirah, help me," she sobbed. "Bobby is going to confess to murdering Cotter. Stop him. Please stop him." Then she saw the sheriff. "Oh my God," she wailed. Scott stood up. "Mrs. Hayward, I better go find your son and hear what he has to say. And I suggest you look into your own heart and decide why he suddenly felt the need to confess to murder." Flanked by Scott Alshorn and the 2 sheriff's deputies, Bobby Crandall was taken to the Monterey County Police Station. A few minutes later, Alvirah and Willy accompanied Nadine as they followed in the spa limo. Nadine was no longer sobbing. Wordless on the brief drive, when they reached the station, she demanded to see the sheriff. "I have something very important to tell him," she said. Alvirah sensed immediately what Nadine was going to do. "Nadine, I want you to get a lawyer before you say one word." "A lawyer can't help me. No one can.
Well.
They were escorted to a waiting room, where they sat until Scott sent for them an hour later. By then, Alvirah was so worried that she almost forgot to turn on the recorder in her sunburst pin.
Yay.
Where is Bobby? Nadine demanded when they were finally escorted to Scott's office. He's waiting for his confession to be typed up. He has nothing to confess to, Nadine cried. Scott interrupted her. Mrs. Hayward, don't say another word until you listen to me. You've heard of the Miranda warning? Yes. Alvirah felt Willy's hand reach to comfort her as Scott read the Miranda warning to Nadine. Gave it to her to read. Asked her if she understood it. Yes, and I know I'm entitled to have a lawyer. Very well. Scott turned to a deputy. Get the stenographer. Alvirah, you and Willy wait outside. Oh no, please let them stay. Nadine was trembling. Alvirah put an arm around her. Let me stay with her, Scott. Nadine's confession was straightforward. I phoned Cotter at the condo. I told him I had to talk to him. What time was that? I'm not sure. I was in bed. I couldn't sleep. What did you want to talk to him about? Scott asked. I was going to tell him about the jewelry being stolen and beg him not to report it. Alvirah, you're so smart. I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd find out who took it. I did wear some of the pieces the other night. A number of people admired them, and all those same people are here. Maybe everything is in a safe in one of the cottages. Did he agree to meet you? Scott asked. Yes, on the golf links. Why not in the condo? Alvirah asked. You're his wife. He said he felt like a walk, and that would make it just about halfway for the two of us. He told me exactly how to get there. Why did you bring a golf club? Scott asked. Nadine bit her lip. Cotter could become quite violent. I was afraid that if he became enraged, and that's just what happened. When I told him about the theft and the premium, he was so angry. He raised his hand and tried to hit me. I backed off and raised the club, and... Her voice trailed off. Then she whispered, I don't remember hitting him, but then he was lying there, and I knew he was dead. You put the golf club back in Elise Hayward's car? Yes. I just wanted to get rid of it. Why her car? I knew she had clubs there. I'd seen her with them. On the way out of the spa, I cut through the parking lot. Not only his forehead, but Scott's entire face appeared to be creased in thought. You make a more credible confession than your son did, he said. I'm sorry for you, Mrs. Hayward. You'd have done Bobby a much bigger favor letting him face the music for crashing the insurance premium check. He could have handled it. He was willing to face the gas chamber rather than let you be arrested for your husband's murder. I can tell you now that his confession didn't hold water. Scott stood up. When your statement is typed up and signed, you'll be formally arraigned. As of now, you are under arrest on suspicion of murder in the first degree. Alvirah and Willy had gone to the police station with Nadine, and now they returned from it with Bobby, a study in misery. He sat hunched in the car, his chin resting on his clasped hands, his eyes half closed. Alvirah's maternal instincts coursed through her entire being. He hurts so much, she thought, and he's blaming himself. Finally, she spoke to him. Bobby, you'll stay in your mother's cottage, won't you? Yes, if Baroness von Schreiber allows it. My mother was only supposed to stay till Saturday. I know, Min. And we'll have a place for you. She turned to Willy. I think you and Bobby should stick together the rest of the day. Take him over to the gym or the pool. She closed her lips, not wanting to promise what she couldn't deliver. But as the limo cruised along the 17-mile drive, she decided to say her piece. Bobby, I know you didn't kill Carter Hayward, and I'm just as sure your mother didn't kill him either. She thinks she's protecting you, just as you thought you were protecting her. Now I want the truth. What happened after Willie and I left you the other night?
Could you imagine? Just being like, I'll take the fall for my mom, and your mom being like, I'll take the fall for you. Stop it. Wait, you need to both stop.
Like, no one's done it. Shut the fuck up, idiot. The faintest hope brightened Bobby's face. He brushed back the dark blonde hair that was so like his mother's. Mom and I were pretty wrung out. She said that she knew Carter would start thinking about her not wearing any of the jewelry at dinner, and it might be better if she told him what had happened instead of waiting till Saturday. We both went to bed. I could hear her crying for a while, but I didn't know whether I should go to her. Then I fell asleep. He glanced nervously at the front seat, then realized that Alvirah had pushed the button that raised the privacy glass between them and the chauffeur. I woke up about 5 o'clock and looked in on Mom. She wasn't in her room. I found her address book and called Hayward's condo, but there wasn't any answer. I was scared and decided to go over there. I was afraid she'd gone to see him and that maybe something had happened to her. I jogged over, but when I got there, I saw police cars. A maintenance man told me what had happened. After that, I just kind of panicked. That's why I confessed to the murder, because if my mother did it, she did it for me. Alvirah looked at the young man, his face a mask of misery. I don't believe she did it, Bobby, she said. I told Sheriff Alshon that there may have been other people who had a good reason to kill your stepfather. Now my job is to find out which one did it. There was a large manila envelope waiting for Alvirah in the cottage. It was the material she had requested from Charlie Evans, her editor at the New York Globe. Volumes of newspaper and magazine clippings and stories about Carter Hayward. Alvirah almost forgot that she had missed lunch as she began to dive into them. She then remembered the breakfast mini-muffin and realized that her looming headache was not caused by stress alone. She phoned room service. 10 minutes later, a smiling waitress appeared with a glass of spring water, a pot of herb tea, and a carrot and cucumber salad, the luncheon menu of the day. Alvirah thought longingly of a nice, juicy hamburger, then remembered Bara Snow's remark about her sister getting a McDonald's franchise in her divorce settlement. She half smiled, thinking that at this moment she felt as though she could eat the sister's profits in one sitting. I'm so fucking hungry, I could eat all that she's ever made from the franchise. All of it! Alvirah found that the voluminous material on Carter J. Hayward actually did make fascinating reading. He had been born in Darien, Connecticut, the grandson of the inventor of a circuit carrier for long-distance telephone calls, who had sold his invention to AT&T for $60 million. Oh. Huge money in those days, Alvirah thought as she made a note in her pad. That was when Carter the First bought the jewelry for his wife, because he was a notorious skinflint. The purchase made headlines. The jewelry was passed on to his son, Carter the Second, the playboy whose 4 wives each in turn got to wear it. But while the jewelry may have remained intact, his lavish living and matrimonial settlements much diminished the family fortune. Carter III, Nadine's late husband and Elise's late ex-husband, seemed to be something of a chip off both blocks. There were dozens of pictures of him in his younger days, escorting film stars and debutantes. He had married Elise when he was 35, and like his grandfather, was known for his parsimony. I am so not smart. He did his own investing and was rumored to be worth over $100 million, but no real figures were available. He must have been a terrific golfer, Alvirah decided. Many of the pictures of him were taken on the golf course, playing with people like Jack Nicklaus and former President Ford. The older pictures showed him and Elise arm in arm, dressed for golfing, sometimes accepting awards together. The most recent pictures, those taken in the last 3 years, showed him with Nadine at social events, but there wasn't a single one of her at the golf outings. One picture in particular caught Alvirah's eye. It showed Elise and Bara Snow being awarded matching trophies at a charity outing at the Ridgewood Country Club in New Jersey, and Cotter Hayward as chairman of the outing presenting them. That was only 6 weeks ago, she thought. Cotter's smile that day seemed very genuine as he stood between the women. Elise was smiling up at him. Love/hate, Alvirah thought. It's what Elise felt for her ex. She read the caption under the picture and then raised her eyes. Oh my, she thought. Oh my. Reaching for the phone, she called Charlie at the Globe, thanked him for the material he'd sent, and requested him to have other material faxed as soon as possible. I know it's 8 o'clock in New York, but if you could put someone on it right away, I'll ask him in to let me have a key to the office so I can collect it tonight. Thanks a lot! Her next job was to play back the recordings she had made at the dinner table last night, at Nadine's cottage and at lunch. As she listened, she made notes. An exhausted Willy came in at 6 o'clock. We swam. We did those exercise machines. Bobby knows all about using them. Then we had a glass of orange juice together and talked. He's a nice young fellow, honey, and he knows his mother is in this situation because of him. I tell you, if somehow the real murderer can be found and Nadine gets off, Bobby Crandall won't so much as buy a lottery ticket again. Then Willie noticed the piles of clippings sorted on the table. Any luck? Not really, but I'm not sure. Anyhow, dinner should be interesting. To Alvirah's relief, their entire table was in attendance. She'd been afraid that Elise might decide to have dinner served in her cottage, but the first Mrs. Hayward, still icy in her composure, was elegantly dressed in a dark blue ankle-length sheath. Bara Snow was wearing a white silk pantsuit that showed off her silver blonde beauty. But she's not as gorgeous as her pictures in those ads, Alvirah thought. Little lines were visible around Bara's eyes and mouth. The discussion seemed to focus on Nadine's arrest. I hope she realizes that if she's convicted, she won't collect a dime of Cotter's money, Elise said, an unmistakable note of satisfaction in her voice. As you say, the 9th commandment must be obeyed, Alvirah prodded. I mean, when you think about it, if you and Mr. Hayward had patched things up 4 years ago, I guess you did that a lot, didn't you? Fight and make up. Then you'd be his widow. Instead of that, you turned to Nadine. I'm sorry for you two. We all hate to lose a husband, but there's nothing the matter with being a rich widow. I really don't appreciate your observations, Mrs. Meehan, Elise said sharply. I've been made aware of your reputation as an amateur detective, but please spare me your ruminating. Alvirah made herself look distressed. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to offend you. She hoped she looked properly penitent. I'm just so sorry for Nadine. I mean, she's not a golfer. She has such fair skin, and her son told Willie that she is the world's worst athlete. She's more the artistic type, I think. Anyhow, what I mean is that we just had bad luck for everybody that Cotter and you didn't make up, wasn't it? And bad luck for her that of all things, she carried your golf club when she went to meet him. I certainly hope she wasn't trying to throw suspicion on you. But then sometimes murderers get so rattled they make mistakes. Elise pointedly ignored Alvirah and her comments and began chatting exclusively with the Jennings couple. While Barra flirted half-heartedly with the former congressman over dessert, Alvirah was dismayed to hear that Elise was leaving on Saturday. I just want to get 1,000,000 miles away, Elise said. This place is totally depressing, and I never played worse golf. I knew I'd be lousy today. Then Barra said, I'm leaving too. There was a call from my agency. I have to do some retakes in New York on a photo shoot for Adrian. I'm canceling my second week here. Alvirah found it hard not to stare at Elise. The microphone was on, and later she'd have to listen to every word they'd said at dinner. Elise had given something away. What was it? The nightly entertainment was a slideshow and lecture on 14th century Spanish art. As people drifted into the back parlor where chairs had been placed, Alvirah asked Min for a key to her office. I've got more faxes coming later, and I want to see them tonight. Min's warm smile was for the benefit of observers. When she spoke, her voice was ancient. 6 guests canceled their next week's reservation. They are furious at the way the media is swarming outside the gates. Alvirah, why couldn't Nadine have killed Carter with one of his own golf clubs? Why did she have to take one of these premises? Was she trying to make it look as though Elise had committed the crime? That's what's been bugging me, Alvirah replied, nodding. I don't get it either. Why replace a club with blood all over it unless you want it to be found?
Thank you.
The next morning, at Alvirah's request, Scott Alshorn came to Tranquility Cottage for morning coffee. Are you satisfied? She asked him point blank. I mean totally, completely satisfied that Nadine killed her husband? Scott studied the contents of his cup. Good coffee. You didn't answer Alvirah's question, Willy told him sternly. Alvirah smiled to herself. She knew Willy was still a little miffed at Scott for the way he'd talked to her yesterday. I'm not sure I can, Scott said slowly. Nadine has confessed. She had a motive, a very strong motive. There are 2 local telephone charges on the bill for her cottage. One that was made on the 9th, that was Wednesday. One was made on the 10th, that was yesterday, and would be consistent with her saying she called Carter Hayward Wednesday night and Bobby saying he tried to reach Carter early Thursday morning. So what have I got to doubt about her statement? Sheriff, have you ever spread a rumor to flush out a killer? Alvirah asked. I mean, defense attorneys in California do it all the time to protect their clients, so why not do it when it might accomplish some good? As he shook his head, she said persuasively, Scott, it all has to do with the jewelry. Don't you see that? The jewelry is still missing. Let's suppose that Nadine knew that Carter Hayward was getting ready to dump her and staged a robbery so that at least she'd come out of the marriage with jewelry. She thought she could find a way to sell. The minute she called Bobby to report the loss and found out that he let the policy lapse, all she had to do was cancel the robbery. She called Bobby before she told Min about it. And let me tell you, when I met her, Nadine was frantic. All right. She didn't steal her own jewelry. I'll buy that. Are you sure Bobby was still in New York the afternoon of the theft? Yes. We had his movements verified. Then somebody else stole that stuff. And dollars to donuts, that person is the killer. Scott, go along with me on this, please. It was a beautiful day. The morning sun beamed warm and bright over the Olympic-sized pool and the surrounding tables with their rainbow-colored umbrellas. At one of the tables, a portable radio was tuned into a local newscast, its volume on high. Riveted attention had replaced the quiet languor of guests who'd mixed a morning of exercise with facials and seaweed wraps and massages. The voice on the radio was reporting that there was a rumor that the sheriff had been keeping a lid on important evidence. Several clear footprints had been discovered in the wooded area near the 16th hole, where Cotter Hayward had been murdered. The sheriff was said to believe that they were the footprints of the killer, who apparently had been hiding and waiting for Hayward. What made this discovery especially significant was that these footprints, while clearly those of a woman, were definitely larger than the confessed killer's size, which was 5.5.
Oh my god. Tiny.
And the shocker, the broadcaster continued, is that the stolen jewelry was actually paste copies, which Hayward had made when he switched insurance policies. He was always concerned that Bobby Crandall would do exactly what he did, cash the premium check and let the policy lapse. So it looks as whoever stole the Hayward jewelry is stuck with fool's gold. Great plan. Alvirah was not able to sit at Elise Hayward's table this afternoon, but she did manage to capture a spot at one next to it. She switched on her recorder and turned her chair toward Elise. Then in a voice that was sure to carry, said, "That's not the whole story. You know, I nose around a little, and I hear they're so sure the killer is a guest here that the sheriff is getting a court order to check the shoe sizes of all the women at the spa. If he finds a match, the judge will let him search the cottage and belongings to look for the jewelry." "That's illegal," someone protested. "This is California," Alvirah reminded her. She leaned backwards as far as she dared, without toppling over, and was able to hear with her own ears Elise saying very quietly, "How like Cotter! How very like Cotter!" Then she pushed her chair away from the table and excused herself. Alvirah knew that a woman detective dressed as spa maid would be following Elise. She had another plan, however. When it was time to leave for the afternoon appointments, she quietly followed Bara Snow to her cottage, slipped around to the patio, and, flattening herself against the side of the sliding glass door, peered in. She pulled her head back as Bara looked around. Then she inched forward just far enough to see Bara shove aside the portrait of Min and helmet and dial the combination of her safe. A moment later, she pulled out a plastic bag, the sparkling contents of which were heaped together. "I thought so," Alvirah breathed. "I thought so. Now Bara has to get rid of them." She stepped back. Bara's cottage, like Nadine's, was one of the farthest from the main house, a bit remote, with a wooded area behind it. Where was Bara going to try to dump the stuff? Alvirah wondered. I was sure it was Elise, Alvirah thought. But then when I asked Charlie Evans to send me the file photos from that outing at the Ridgewood Country Club, I started seeing a different picture. In a couple of the photos, the way Cotter and Bara looked at each other tells a lot. Then on the tape, it's so clear that Bara persuaded Elise to go golfing yesterday. Bara was the one who sent the caddy for the clubs, knowing all along that he would find. She didn't seem to care whether Elise was implicated or if Nadine remained the prime suspect. Either way, no one would think her involved in the murder. Alvirah's suspicions had been deepened when Bara had said she had to go back for a photo shoot. Alvirah knew that wasn't true. The caption under the picture referred to her as the ex-Adrian model. That's what had caught Alvirah's eye. Plus, she had made the crack about her sister getting a McDonald's franchise in her divorce settlement. What did Bara say? I wasn't that lucky. I bet she hasn't got much money at all, Alvirah told herself. The question remained, however, did she do the robbery on her own? And how did she know the combination of Nadine's safe? There was only one person who could have given it to her, Alvirah realized. Carter Hayward. Would he have stolen his own jewelry to get the insurance money to pay off that final $3 million to Elise? It was quiet on the inside cottage. Bara must be going crazy trying to figure out where to dump the jewelry she believes is worthless, Alvirah thought. Then her reverie was abruptly broken as something small and hard was pressed to her back, and she heard Bara Snow murmur, "You're much too clever for your own good, Mrs. Meehan." I got a gun in your back, see? Don't take a step or I'll shoot, see? Scott Alshorn was in a bad mood. He did not like the idea of allowing false rumors to swirl around during a murder investigation. Therefore, it was not hard to look coldly furious when once again he got out of his car at the gates of the spa to confront the media. "I have no comment about the alleged footprints in the vicinity of the murder scene," he said, his tone frosty. "I will not discuss the rumors that the stolen jewelry consisted of paste copies of the Hayward gems. I will actively pursue discovery of the source of any leaks from my office to the media." And that much at least is true, he thought, as he pushed his way past the microphones and cameras back to the car. The grounds of the spa had a deserted feeling. Scott knew that after luncheon was served, the serious business of beauty resumed with a vengeance. Min was always after him to take a full day of treatment as her guest. Just what I need, he thought irritably, to be wrapped in seaweed. He went directly to Min's office where Walt Pierce, one of his deputies, Min, Helmut, and Willy were awaiting him. "Where's Alvirah?" he asked. "She should be here any minute," Willy told him, evasively. "Meaning she's up to something," Scott said, congratulating himself that he had assigned Liz Hill, a woman deputy, to keep track of Alvirah. He turned to Pierce. "Any reports yet?" "Darva called in," Pierce told him. "She followed Elise Hayward to her cottage. She's got her under observation now." "Any indication that Hayward has the jewelry?" Scott demanded. "She went straight for the safe," Pierce informed him. "She had a bottle of gin hidden in it." "Gin?" Min exclaimed. "It is part of our code of honor that guests will not conceal liquor in the safe. The maids are instructed to report any evidence of spirits in the cottages, but of course they do not have access to the safes." You tell me this shit's dry, too?
It's 900 calories a day. It's dry. I think this is a cold.
I mean, to be honest, I probably said that really early, and I just don't remember because it's so
care.
long.
The 900 calories a day is what's fucking me up.
How can our guests lose weight if they imbibe? Helmut sighed. How can they retain the fresh bloom of youth? You manage, Willy thought.
Oh.
Darva has Elise Hayward under surveillance with her binoculars. She says Hayward is crying and laughing and drinking. In other words, she's tying one on. Pierce continued. There goes Alvirah's theory, Scott said. If Elise Hayward had the jewelry, she'd be trying to unload it. The last thing she'd be doing is getting drunk. Walt, what have you heard from Liz? Mrs. Meehan is hiding on the patio of Barnsnow's cottage. Liz can't see the interior, just the front side opposite the patio. But so far, no activity. How long has Liz been there? Scott asked. About 15 minutes. The walkie-talkie Pierce was holding buzzed. He snapped it on and said, What's up? Then his tone changed. He looked at Min. Deputy Hill wants to know if there's another entrance to Barnsnow's cottage. Yes, Min said. That cottage has a sliding glass door from the master bedroom to the back patio. Scott grabbed the walkie-talkie. What's the matter? He listened, then asked, Are you wearing a maid's uniform? All right. Go up to the cottage. Make an excuse to go inside, then report back. Willie felt the familiar sickening lurch in the pit of his stomach that always grabbed him when he began to worry about Alvirah. A moment later, the walkie-talkie buzzed again. Deputy Hill made no attempt to speak softly, and they could all hear her. Bar Snow and Mrs. Meehan are gone. They must have left through the back door. There's only a few feet from the woods. Snow must have opened the wall safe. Picture in front of it is pushed aside. We're on the way, Scott told her. Try to pick up their trail. Willie grabbed his arm. Where do those woods end? At the Pebble Beach Club, Min told him. If Bara has the jewelry, she must be planning to get rid of it somewhere in those woods. It would be almost impossible to find. There are more than 80 acres, and much of it is dense and even swampy in places. Then, noting the look on Willie's face, she added hastily, But Alvirah may simply be following her. I'm sure she's fine. Alvirah stumbled through the thick undergrowth, prodded on by the gun in her back. The lush vegetation clawed at her ankles, and countless insects buzzed around her face. I attract mosquitoes, she thought. If there was only one mosquito in the world, it would find me. Move faster, Bara ordered. If I could just distract her, Alvirah thought, looking about for something to use as a club, anything with which to defend herself. She deliberately stumbled and fell to her knees, then used the moment to catch her breath. Where are you taking me? She demanded, looking up at Bara Snow. She found it difficult to reconcile this hard-eyed, thin-lipped woman with the sophisticated, amusing one she'd sat at the same table with these past few days. It was as though Bara had donned a mask. Or maybe, Alvirah thought, her other face was the mask. You killed Carter Hayward, didn't you? She asked. You stole the jewelry? Snow pointed the gun at her. Get up, she ordered, unless you want to die here. Alvirah scrambled to obey. She had the presence of mind to turn on the recorder in her pin as she got to her feet. Then, hoping Bara wouldn't notice, she slid the small shoulder bag down her arm and as she began to move, let it drop. That's better. Keep going. All right. Alvirah dragged her feet, hoping to leave some trace of a trail. It was stifling in this place, with no breeze penetrating the dense foliage. She could hardly breathe. But no matter what, she needed to get a confession on record. Tell me something, she panted. Did you kill Carter? Alvirah, you're so smart. You must have it all figured out. Just shut up and move. Alvirah felt the gun again, this time at the back of her head. The way I figure it, you stole the jewelry and tried to make it look like a break-in by throwing all that stuff around. You must have really wondered why Nadine didn't report the theft. I'm going as fast as I can, she gasped. Don't keep sticking that thing in my neck. Then she continued. The question is, why did you kill Hayward? He was meeting you on the golf course, wasn't he? My bet is that you were supposed to hand the jewelry over to him. Am I right? Yes, you're right. Fury and frustration resounded in Bara Snow's voice. Moments later, the woods thinned suddenly, and they came upon a swampy area. Alvirah felt mud oozing beneath her feet. Directly ahead of them was a pond, all slimy water and vegetation. We have to be getting near the grounds of the Pebble Beach Club, she thought. What does she think she's going to do now? I bet he gave you the combination to Nadine's safe and was going to claim the insurance money to pay off a lease, she volunteered. Right on all counts, Bara said. You can stop now. Alvirah turned. The thing is, why did you kill him? Was it because of the way Elise talked about him being so cheap and Nadine being left penniless if she ever even divorced him? Or maybe you thought you were better off with that." She pointed to the bag of jewelry Bara was carrying. "Right again, Alvirah." This time Bara Snow pointed the gun at Alvira's heart. "And when I tell them that I saw you dash past my cottage, following a man who looked like one of the caddies at the Pebble Beach Club, they'll start looking for the killer here, not at the spa. And I'll be back at the spa in time for my facial. By the time they find you, if they find you, since that pond is deep and the mud sucks you down like quicksand, I'll be far away from here. Now take these fake jewels in your clammy little hands. I want to get rid of both them and you." As Alvirah obeyed, Bara stepped back and aimed the gun once again at Alvirah's heart. As he ran to Bara's cottage, Scott ordered that squad cars be sent to both sides of the woods and that deputies begin to search for Bara and Alvirah. "They could have gone anywhere," he snapped. "Wait, we'll split up until more help comes. Min, you and the Baron and Willy stay out of it." Ignoring the sheriff's command, Willy plunged into the thickets, shouting for Alvirah. "That woman is a killer," he said to himself, "and she's getting desperate. If she knows Alvirah is following her, it's better if she realizes other people around as well, that she can't get away with another murder." Willy realized that the sheriff and the deputy had gone off in another direction from the one in which his instincts told him to head. "Maybe I better veer over in the direction of the ocean," Willy thought, worried now that his instincts might be wrong. Maybe Bara Snow would try to get Alvirah down to the beach. Then he saw it, Alvirah's pocketbook. He was sure she dropped it on purpose. Then he was able to make out where some grass was trampled. Yes, this was the right direction. He charged ahead, reaching the clearing in time to see what was happening, but not in time to stop Bara Snow. As Bara pulled the trigger, Alvirah swerved, then felt a sharp pain coming from the vicinity of her sunburst pin. Okay, every time I said I need a drink, and I don't have any, so I gotta get some. As Bara pulled the trigger, Alvirah swerved, and she felt a sharp pain coming from the vicinity of her sunburst pin. As she toppled backwards into the water, she thought, "My God, I've been shot!" Willy lunged through the mud and grabbed Bara's arm just as she pointed the gun at the spot where Alvirah was starting to sink. The shot exploded into the air as he wrenched the gun from her hand, tossed it into the water, then pushing her down, leaped after it. "I've got you, honey," he said, lifting Alvirah's head. "I've got you."
Oh.
Alvirah felt a pain in her shoulder. "The pin," she thought. "My sunburst pin took the bullet." She had been saved by ducking and sheer luck. Bara's aim had been thrown off by her movement, and the bullet had merely grazed the pin. She felt the pain radiating from the point of impact, but again thought in wonder, "I'm all right. I know I'm all right. And I've still got the jewelry." She managed not to faint until she had the satisfaction of seeing Scott come charging into the clearing in time to collar Bara Snow, who was struggling furiously to extract herself from the mire. "I think the occasional calls for breaking the cardinal rule of the Cypress Point Spa," Helmut said, as a maid carrying champagne and glasses on a tray followed him into Tranquility Cottage. Alvirah's arm was in a sling. She was comfortably ensconced on a sofa in the sitting room and beaming amiably at Min, Scott, Nadine, and Bobby. Willy, still pale with worry over her narrow escape, was hovering over her like a mother hen. "I think you need rest, honey," he said for the 15th time in the last 5 hours. "I'm fine," Alvirah said, "and forever thankful that I insisted on wearing my pin just in case. Heaven knows I never thought just in case would include getting shot at. The pin's pretty well destroyed, but the recording is still okay. I got Bara Snow cold." She beamed at the thought. Scott Alshorn shook his head. Once again he found himself counting his blessings that Alvirah Meehan lived a continent away. She attracted trouble, no question about it. He grudgingly admitted to himself, though, that Alvira's scheme to spread the rumors about the footprints at the crime scene and the paste jewelry had certainly worked. If he hadn't gone along with it, Nadine Hayward would still be in jail, sticking to her story that she had murdered her husband just to protect her son. And Bara Snow would be packing her bags and heading home, leaving behind a murdered man and taking with her $4 million worth of jewelry. He accepted a glass of champagne when offered one, and when Helmut proposed a toast to Alvirah, Scott gladly joined in acknowledging her valor. Nevertheless, with an eye to the future, he decided it was time to say his piece. Alvirah, my good friend, you've saved the day again. But I would implore you to realize that if a deputy had not been following you, who you put on my trail, Alvirah interrupted. That was very clever of you, Scott. Thank you. I would like to point out that you came within an inch of losing your life today, and all because you did not simply ask for help when you followed Bara Snow. Alvirah's attempt to look chagrined was not convincing. I'll be honest, she said. I was betting mostly on Elise being the murderer. It just made sense. And let me tell you, there really was a love-hate relationship between her and Carter Hayward. Looking back, I agree, Nadine said quietly. Apparently one of the things that attracted Carter to me was that I didn't play golf. I gather he and Elise would go into constant screaming matches about each other's games. But after 4 years, I think he was bored with me and missed that kind of companionship. Except that he was getting it from Bara, not Elise, Scott interjected. When Elise Hayward learned what happened this afternoon, she admitted that she honestly thought Carter Hayward was getting interested in being with her again. Then she sensed there was someone else in the picture, but she hadn't guessed that it was Bara. She turned to Nadine. He half smiled when he saw the blissfully peaceful look on her face and the absolute happiness emanating from her son Bobby. But then he forced himself to look stern. Nadine, you and Bobby lied for each other. It was easy to see through Bobby's attempts to cover for you, but please realize you could have gone to the gas chamber if a judge or a jury had believed your story. Fortunately, Alvirah did not, and I had a gut-level doubts about it as well. But you did leave your cottage after you went to bed the other night, Alvirah said. That's why Bobby went looking for you. I never did hear where you went. Nadine looked embarrassed. I did make a call to Carter, but when he answered, I was so upset, I just hung up. Then I went over to the lap pool and settled into one of the beach chairs. I knew no one would see or hear me there, and I didn't want Bobby to hear me crying. I guess I was so exhausted I fell asleep. So that's why there was a blanket on one of those chairs, Min breathed. I am glad to hear it. When it was reported to me, I did not know what to think. You fucking matter? A towel! I have a point to make, Alvirah said, and now she looked stern. Nadine, I gather you're now a very wealthy woman. I'll say this right in front of Bobby. You won't do him any favors if you ever cover gambling debts for him. I agree, Bobby said. He looked at Nadine. Mom, I don't deserve you. Min arose. I must get to the main house. Tonight, I lecture on the need for quiet meditation as part of the overall process of achieving beauty. This time, Willy spoke up. Min, with all due respect, thanks for your hospitality, but in the interest of achieving a little peace, we're heading back to New York in the morning. You can let someone on the waiting list know that Tranquility Cottage is available.
Oh, Willy.
Oh, Willy! Jesus Christ.
I love his books on it.
Like a good show. You can just pick up months later and you're still like, I love every second and I'm having too much fun.